Well, folks, today we actually have a really great story in regards to Nintendo Switch 2, and I don't really care how we got there. What I do care about is when I wake up in the morning and I'm checking the news wires. Oh my gosh, really great pro-consumer Nintendo Switch 2 news is what I love to see, and that's what we're going to be going over today. We have a couple smaller stories I want to make sure I get to first, just in case I don't have a second video today. My plan is to get two out, but, you know, the news wire kind of decides that at times. But before I dive into that, just got to remind you, we are giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 right now. To enter, all you gotta do is go down to the link in the pinned comment or to the description. One of the requirements, and this is just like a base requirement, it's a giveaway for my subscribers. So, you know, if you want to be subscribed to the channel, cool. If you don't, that's cool as well. Giveaways are what they are. No one has to be here. I just appreciate you checking out the video. All right, today I want to dive into the first two little stories before we get to the big one, because this pro-consumer move, I think, needs a larger conversation. So let's get to the small ones first. Two small stories. Our first one is about, well, a demo. So PSA, Super Mario Bros. Wonder plus Meetup at Bella Bella Park demo is now available at Switch 2 kiosks. I really like that Nintendo's doing this. I obviously would love if they would take these demos and just put them like on our systems, like able to download. But sometimes the demos aren't built in a way that makes that feasible, data mining, all sorts of stuff. And I know Switch 2 is not like hacked, so I guess I really shouldn't be as big of a deal right now, but still, maybe it's just not safe or stable or could enable hacks to happen. So yeah, I get sometimes why they only do it at the kiosk. That said, hey, it's out there if you guys want to go give it a try. If you're still on the fence about it, just go to your local Target, Best Buy, Walmart, whoever has a Switch 2 kiosk. I'm assuming you know at this point. Like for me, I have to go to Best Buy to use a kiosk. No one else has one, but they do get the updated demos. So that's really, really cool. And well, I probably won't be going to check it out because I don't need convincing. It's at least there for those that do. Next up, we're going to be talking about an update that comes to a game that's already out that just makes it way better. System Shock 2.1 update brings massive improvements to performance. So Night Dive Studios has confirmed that a new update for System Shock on Switch 1 and 2 is now available for download, bringing huge improvements to the game's performance. Patch 2.1 has been applied across all available platforms to nuke any nasty bugs, but it's Nintendo's consoles that receive the most, well, loving care, right? Performance has been stabilized, with Switch 1 now running up to 900p when docked, 720p in handheld, both targeting 30 FPS. On Switch 2, this is great, the resolution is 1440p well docked and 1080p in handheld. And here's the big one, it now consistently runs at 60 FPS. We've quickly tested it out ourselves, this is Nintendo Life, on Switch 2 in preparation for this article, and we can confirm that frame rate is a massive improvement over the initial release in 2025. The producer at Night Dive Studios, Justin Kan, had this to say: System Shock version 2.1, the parody patch, marks nearly 10 years since the System Shock remake project began. This patch represents countless lessons learned, the dedication of a small but determined team, and our commitment to refining the experience across every platform. Thank you for sticking with us through the ups and downs of that journey. So, while it's been a little while coming, System Shock is now finally providing the polished experience fans deserve. You know, they're not going to be able to revisit their review where they give it a 5 out of 10, but obviously it would go up a few notches thanks to these performance patches, because we already know how good System Shock is, like literally, but you know, obviously when it released, it had some rough points with performance, and the guy does admit, hey, we're a really small team that did this, and we patched it on all platforms, but obviously these Switch 1 and Switch 2 versions are the ones that needed the most love and care because they had the most issues, and we now have those issues taken care of, which is exactly what we want to see. Now we have to get into the big story today. This story is something that I love to see regardless of how we see it. The report's coming right out of Japan, but of course it's at Nikkei, which paid articles, and I can't even find a way to pay on their website to see the whole article. And I know I could use like other services to try to read the whole thing. And I did do that, but I don't want to display that on screen for you guys. So instead, we'll go to Nintendo Life again for this one, just to get a rough idea what's happening. And it says Europe might be forcing Nintendo to revise the Switch 2, a revision with a replaceable battery, according to Nikkei. So Nintendo is working on a new Switch 2 revision to comply with European Union rules around the ability for owners to replace batteries in consumer electronics themselves, according to a new report from Nikkei. The Japanese outlet reports that this move is specifically targeted at the European market, although Nintendo may also implement similar policies in Japan and the United States if consumer awareness of the right to repair increases. So this would basically be, hey, if consumers find out there's this replaceable battery thing in Europe and they end up like, oh my God, why don't we have this here? That little demand, that backlash that could cause them to release a revision here that ends up having such things, even though they're not legally required to. Anyways, with past Nintendo handhelds, it's been possible to easily access and replace batteries. However, both the Switch 1 and Switch 2 have batteries housed within the console shells and aren't replaceable without opening the system with specialized tools. Likewise, the Switch 2 Pro controller, which teardown site iFixit called a piss poor excuse for a controller, highlighting how its battery isn't user replaceable. We've reached out to Nintendo, obviously, for comment on this. Nothing's happened yet. In 2022, new EU rules forcing manufacturers to standardize phone chargers led to Apple abandoning its Lightning power connectors in favor of USB-C for iPhones sold in the region. Multiple hardware versions for different territories are typically deemed impractical for global brands, and all new iPhones have a USB-C port. It's unclear whether the Switch 2 revision would be labeled as a new version of the console, or if it would just be a silent revision similar to Switch 1. When in 2019, they offered obviously that version 2.0 that offered that improved battery life that we got from the thing, but also patched. Look, the real reason they released that was the patch, one of the major vulnerabilities that was leading to hack Switch 1s. A little late at that point, but you kind of catch my drift here. What's really interesting here is you go down here, the same thing leaked for Apple devices and PlayStation 5 DualSense controllers last year as well. And Apple already announced this change and already did it for the new MacBook Neo. So this is something that obviously, is being slowly rolled out. The European Union and others are being very... I don't want to say laxed, but very understanding that it could take some time to convert new devices over to this, considering that they haven't had to do this before. It's kind of like with the USB-C port. They were still selling Lightning ones at the time those laws were passed. Obviously, they were given some leeway for Apple to kind of figure it out before they would do anything or fine them or prevent their products from releasing, etc. And there is a point here in Nintendo Life and Nikkei's article where for global brands who mass manufacture millions and millions of units like Apple and Samsung, obviously just like PlayStation, Xbox, I suppose, and Nintendo, it does behoove them to unify that processing because it just makes it cheaper to manufacture the system. It doesn't make sense to make one system for one market and everyone else gets a completely different system. That actually increases the cost of manufacturing. So it's going to be interesting to see if a quiet revision just comes out maybe by this holiday season that ends up just not really being even announced by Nintendo, but just exists and has an easily removable battery that can be replaced. Maybe even a better battery would be nice. And obviously that means the battery itself has to be available to be sold as well, whether directly through Nintendo or some third-party websites, which again, you can buy battery replacements for Switch 1 and Switch 2, like they do exist, but they're not wrong in saying that it's clearly not intended to be replaced. Yeah, you need specialized tools, which are easy to find and buy, but like they glue the batteries down and you have to pry them up. And regardless if you use the proper techniques, there's always a risk when you're doing that you can puncture the battery and cause problems. Even professionals that work in the repair business, look, it doesn't happen to them hardly ever, but they can probably tell you a story where it actually has. And that's despite having the right tools and, having done this hundreds if not thousands of times. So that's not really considered user friendly. That's not something you would want a consumer to do in their home. That is very dangerous. It can be very dangerous, can lead to fires and explosions and all sorts of stuff. So it's not really user-friendly replaceable, regardless of the fact that many of us have replaced batteries in our Switch 1s at least. So yeah, it would have to be a more user-friendly solution. That doesn't mean they're going to go to like AA's and anything like that, but it does mean that obviously it would have to be a very easily to remove and replace battery, and also the component has to be just readily available to be purchased and done, obviously with easy access. So yeah, it's going to lead to some redesigns for the European area, and obviously those redesigns could end up being launched worldwide. This is just extremely pro-consumer, and I know I'm not going to give Nintendo like credit for this because they are technically being strong-armed by Europe to have to do it, just as all other tech companies are, and most of the rest of the world is just benefiting from that strong-arming. But still, it's just nice to see this happen, and it's just one thing that's going to make Switch 2 for the majority of its lifetime better than Switch 1. Obviously, we know about more power. We know about the higher resolutions. We know about the better graphics. And obviously, I think superior Joy-Cons. But having the ability to user repair, the most common thing people worry about or might want to replace in the battery. Hell, maybe people want to have hot swappable batteries. Like, think about this, guys. This is actually one of the coolest things about this. People have concerns about battery life, right? Especially using boost mode. It knocks the battery life down by about 25%. For Switch 1 games. Obviously, boost mode doesn't work with Switch 2 games. What's really interesting here is this idea that you could just have pre-charged batteries ready to go. That you can buy extra batteries and have like 2 or 3 batteries that you just carry with you that you hot swap in when the system's about to die or does die. You save your game, you shut her down, hot swap the battery out. Like, that's what's possible with user replaceable batteries. I'm not saying that's going to be a common use case. I think for the most part, like with laptops and phones, and I guess iPhones even being edited to be able to be user replaceable battery for the future. I do think that there is a possibility here where people will do that, but I don't think it's going to be common. I think most people would just only buy that extra battery when that battery's dying, kind of they do for laptops. So you have the ability to buy extra batteries for your laptops and hot swap them in, but most people don't do that, right? But there are some that do. I do actually know people who have laptops with replaceable batteries, and they carry like 4 batteries fully charged with them because they ain't got the time and they ain't always around an area where they can charge. So they need that much battery life. So that even being an option is consumer friendly, let alone once the battery starts to degrade, being able to replace it, or if the battery fails altogether. And obviously, if you're having power issues with your system, being able to swap in a battery just to see if that is the problem is already a very healthy, consumer-friendly way to just have at-home user repair that's really good. And they would have to obviously edit the Pro Controller at some point as well, the Joy-Cons as well. So all of these things should end up getting user-replaceable batteries that are very easy to do. So this is great, honestly. Very pro-consumer. One of the things that I am very thankful to Europe for was making my iPhone here. I have to have the USB-C port because they would have never done this on iPhone, or at least not done this right now, if they weren't forced to, despite the fact they were using USB-C on their tablets already and on their computers. They weren't on the phone because we have a proprietary thing and the third-party ones suck for it, so you're going to have to buy the first-party ones. And then even when they switched, they still did this thing where like third-party ones would charge slower. Third parties have figured workarounds for that. But anyways, the point is, folks, this is very pro-consumer. I'm very happy for it. Thank you to Europe for forcing this change. We don't know when it's going to happen. Obviously, Nikkei is just reporting it's in the works. I would presume probably by the end of this year, if not at some point next year, not to be some new tooling and other things made, some new engineering done. But like revisions we've seen with Switch 1, I think this revision will probably debut. If I had to guess, like, because again, Europe is being very understanding that it takes time to do this, and they're not blocking your products yet, but you obviously have a set time period to make the change. I do think that this will be introduced whenever Nintendo launches the Switch 2 Lite. I think that's the go-to plan here. Introduce it with the Switch 2 Lite, and that's when you see the revision for Switch 1 or Switch 2, the base Switch 2, that changes that out. Now, is that going to cause me to upgrade to the new Switch 2? Well, if it has better battery life, maybe a better screen, maybe. But I probably will wait all the way for the OLED version. And then I'll get to mess around with the hot swappable battery. Or maybe I won't wait, because they dropped a themed Mario 3D Switch 1 that I really, really want, and that happens to have the revision in it. So there are other ways they can get me to get it before the Switch 2 OLED eventually comes out, or Switch 2 Pro, or maybe it never comes. A lot of assumptions here. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Nathaniel Rebel Jance, and I'll catch you in the next video.